Right. Morning, 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 everybody. Hope everybody is well. Right. That's Tuesday. We've obviously had an epic start. Elephant in the room here, USDJPY. It owed us from yesterday, even though we didn't get stopped out yesterday. And I think a couple of you actually held from yesterday, so you did really, really well. But yeah, right. Let's go through everything, what is happening, why, where, how, when. So, dollar even caught me off guard, if I'm honest. I was expecting dollar to be trading below 97,500, but this is where we've got to have an open mind all the time. We've had all this tariff hype, but actually, I think this has been a really good week, learning curve week. So make sure you journal it, write it down because it's a very, very typical example here of you've got the factual information, right, about the dollar. All right. And then we've got all the hype and anticipation around the tariffs and what might happen. Is Trump going to battle it out in court? What's going to, how's it going to impact everyone? So obviously that is, what is commonly, known as hype. All right. But then obviously it's always the factual data which we cannot forget. Now, the only pair that this doesn't apply to is gold, because any hype, any worry, then obviously gold is always going to pump. So let's uh, let's wait and see what happens here. But obviously, yes, the dollar. If you take out all the chatter from Friday afternoon, and over the weekend, dollar is flying. All right, inflation's down, employment's up, everything's going really, really well. And obviously, that's why we're getting that continuation in. And obviously, yields still aren't climbing, which is the interesting thing in my kind of eyes is, dollar is still climbing with yields here, so there's a little bit of a, safe haven flow would tell me going into, the dollar as well as, stocks. Stocks kind of staying steady, not really dumping off, I know obviously US 30 took a bit of a dump yesterday afternoon, but obviously, all in all, nothing, major. But obviously, yes, it would tell me that dollar is potentially acting a little bit like a, safe haven. So on top of obviously strong data, obviously the CPI, inflation, potential lower interest rates, that's what's keeping yields down. However, all in all, dollar is on the fly here. So I think we've done pretty well this morning. Obviously, USDJPY, just a delayed reaction. I think that yen. Sorry, I've got a bit of water in my. I think yen was, stronger yesterday, and obviously that's what gave everything that delayed reaction. But yen has gone from the strongest pair yesterday afternoon to the weakest by far. If you look at the closest thing it is to is pound, which is 0.83% down. It's nearly 1% down on it on everything. All right, so obviously that's where naturally our USD. I actually think that this is going to hit TP. I have closed out because I was very, very happy, but obviously yeah, what did we do just out of interest? I think it was, look at that, in half an hour, 100 and about 115 pips. It's crazy. So that's obviously my overview. In regards to what's coming up today, we've got obviously some ADP employment change, and then we've got consumer confidence at 3. It's a little bit later, so we should obviously be in our trades or afternoon trades already. Consumer confidence tip to go up. You've always got to keep an eye on obviously what it was previously and what it is forecast. So I actually think this is gonna hit. It might even surpass. I think everything is looking pretty good. So let's wait and see. Atlanta GDP as well, supposed to come in on point. I actually think dollar is going to strengthen. It'll be interesting to see. My only concern this afternoon is this 98. All right, it couldn't break it last week without all this tariff news. So I think if it, yeah, it breaks. What I'm kind of hoping is we're obviously out of everything. London. mid London, we tap this, we reject, we come back down into this area, and then we kind of try and break it again during the US. That's what I'm kind of hoping happens. So we've got to obviously anticipate that happening, and obviously, react accordingly. Right, let's go through some of the trades we had. Obviously, top trade of the morning was USDJPY. That was why it was number one. Tapped. It was very, very just spot on, just absolutely spot on. Yeah, just couldn't obviously write it better. This is the beauty of obviously yen. When it goes quickly. We've then got obviously euro hasn't tapped yet, but obviously comfortable. GBP comfortable hasn't tapped either. AUD USD. I don't know if this is going to tap. I was a bit more reserved on this just because price action is quite tight. So I'm just going to wait and see obviously what happens there. And then obviously gold, I'd love, love, love for this to tap into this area. If it is, I probably will hold it. It might even be one that we obviously hold, for a little bit longer than what we normally do, because I do regret kind of, yes, yesterday we got a pinpoint entry. I did close out mid London. We didn't get another entry in the afternoon. But obviously, yeah, we would have hit TP yesterday. And so I think gold, we've got to capitalize on times like this. The uncertainty is going to continue. So yeah, let's wait and see what happens. Yeah, we've obviously still got heavy Iran talks too, so there is a lot to push dollar to the upside, at the moment, especially with this reintroduction of tariffs. So yeah, let's wait and see. Right, I'm going to open the floor up to any questions. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to reach out. What was the catalyst for the USD JPY spike? It's just like I'd said, all right? There's a reason why I trade the times that I do, and I don't trade in between. All right, London Open, you got the initial influx of orders. US Open, you got the initial influx of orders, and if you really wanted to, you could do Asia Open. You're going to have the initial influx of orders. So you still, although forex markets are very, very volatile, you still need to make sure that you are trading the kind of high volatility areas. There's no point trading it at 10 or 11 in the morning or 4 5 in the evening. There is just no point. We want that influx, because obviously that's when the big boys are obviously coming in. It's early. And then that's where the more predictable price action is. Yes, you do get moves at strange times, but it's less predictable. So we want to stay on the higher side of predictability. Missed the USDJPY. Only went to the toilet for a minute. Expensive piss. Gabriella. I've been with you for a short while. I'm already in profit. I just need to calibrate my sizes. Yeah, feel free to reach out, Gabriella. I'm obviously happy to help you with that. That's not a problem. The main thing is to make sure everything's even. All right, because obviously we do work on the basket. If we got a few trades, it's the total kind of basket. Whereas yeah, what I've noticed, and I've critiqued a few people, is they might trade USD JPY at one lot size, Euro USD at another lot size, gold at another. My kind of strict structure is currencies all equal, and then I would trade gold at 10% of what you're trading currencies. So if you're trading a currency at one lot, you want to be trading gold at zero point 0.1. All right. That way you won't get that scarcity, that, oh my God, I'm in a bit of drawdown, because you've got to expect these drawdown swings. And if you're 10%, then it's going to act very, very similar to a currency, and you're not going to stress. Simon, why did USD JPY pump so much? Was euro pound have chopped this morning? Just obviously overall, strength in pairs. You can see here. I mean, this is why I group all my currencies, together on the right hand side here. Because you can see here yen. All right, it's by far the weakest currency. Dollar's not the strongest. Aussie NZD outperforming it. You can see here, Aussie's up against it, NZD's up against it. So we've obviously got to be aware here that we're categorizing the top, which is the US dollar, against the weakest. So any move is going to be exaggerated. Plus, I don't think it moved correctly yesterday. We did get the right direction in the end. It was just very, very slow. Yeah. So let's have a look there. Greg, Trump's State of the Nation speech tomorrow AM. I haven't been in this before when he does a speech. I'm assuming this can be quite impactful for the dollar. Yes, so I think it's at 2 a.m. in the morning, I think. Let me have a look. I think it was about 2 a.m. So, look, all right, this is obviously one of the reasons, Greg, why I like to trade around, news. Yes, you could stay up and you're going to see a bit of, volatility, but I'd rather wake up in the morning fresh, find out what was spoken about, understand his, the important thing I went over this in a one-to-one with someone yesterday. When someone's making a speech, it's all about you got to get to understand what tonality is and whether it's dovish, pessimistic, or hawkish, optimistic. So you've got to kind of try and understand how positive or negative a speech is, and obviously that is what everyone is looking at. It's not actually what he's saying. It's not the data. It's how positive. One thing about Trump, you can guarantee a short-term dollar pump whenever he's speaking, because he's very enthusiastic. He's very ambitious. He's very hawkish. He's very optimistic. So he can't help it. He's not going to say one bad word about America in whatever speech that he does. So obviously everything he says with confidence and power. So obviously that's going to be a short term thing. When you say basket, does that mean closing it all out together? Yes, John, this is obviously one thing that I've realized, and obviously one thing I wish I did when I started all those years ago, was obviously, one thing, probably my hardest lesson was learning to take a loss. All right, it was my by far the hardest lesson. I mean, technicals can take you, 6 months to probably be above average. But obviously, it's then the psychological bit, and learning to close. No word of a lie, took me 5 years, and I'm embarrassed about it, because I just couldn't swallow a loss. Whereas the basket analogy, if you've got a London session target, New York session target, a daily target, and you've hit that, and obviously you've got a few in profit and maybe one in loss, you're going to be more likely to get used to closing this loss. All right. Rather than closing these wins, holding this loss, and it just sucks out all of your profit, So yes, what I would do is whenever you are happy, all right, and obviously everyone's targets are completely different depending on obviously, what size account you got. If you've got a smaller account, you might have a more optimistic target. You might risk more, which, I understand that. I'm not going to be here and say, look, if you're trading a couple of hundred quid, you got to be making, 1 to 2%, risking 1 2%, because no one realistically is going to do it. You might be able to risk 10%. I mean, I wouldn't recommend risking any more, but obviously understand that, because it's not as much, you can obviously risk a bit more. But yeah, so that is how I would look at it. Um, Let's have a look here. Alex, maybe beginner question, but will a war on Iran strengthen the dollar? Okay, so yes, and no. Obviously, it's not great if obviously the US is at war with Iran, but it's how the market's perceiving everything. All right, so the dollar, because it's the the dominant currency in FX, right? Everything's based on it. AUD JPY, the price of it is Australia US dollar versus US dollar JPY. So you've got to obviously understand how dominant the FX markets revolve round the dollar. Gold is priced against the dollar. Silver's priced against the dollar. Even Bitcoin here, what was it priced against the dollar? So obviously everything is priced against the dollar. So it can act as a, safe haven. All right. Now, what we've got to look at, and obviously one thing, it's acting a little bit like a safe haven, I would say, at the moment, because we've got yields not particularly up, very much. I'd say they're trending to the downside. So we've got the optimism that they're going to reduce interest rates. All right. And obviously, if yields were flying, I'd be 100% confident. Yes, dollar is flying because of its overall, strength. I do think majority of the reason why dollar is flying is because of strength, but I also think a little bit of it is because it's flying as a bit of a, safe haven. So that is obviously one thing that we've got to, remember. So yes, it can, that it can act as a safe haven, but it depends obviously the impact, against the US, and it's not a, a definite yes or no. Trader Dan, do you move your stops into profit? Sometimes yes, but obviously lots of times, like this morning, I'm happy. I've got into a very, very good habit. It's a very, very boring trading routine. I understand. There isn't, when I trade, there is no hype, there is no fireworks, there is nothing. But what we do have is a very, very green journal. All right. And obviously that is how where it's supposed to be. So I've tried the fireworks bit. I've tried moving everything and acting and letting things run. But actually, what I've realized over all these years is if I am happy, my job is to hop on these charts every morning and every afternoon and do my best job to try and take money out of it. And it is a random job because I'm looking at a screen, right? I'm monitoring random bars. I'm looking at data, which could be, manipulated. But obviously, and actually, if you break it down a bit like that, it is crazy, So obviously, our job is to take money out. And I have guys, saying, "Oh, I've closed early. I'm gutted." Or, I didn't make as much yesterday as what I wanted to, or, I took a bit of a loss, on this day. But actually, always think about where you were, say a month ago, 3 months ago. Would a losing day mean you've pretty much blown your account as opposed to only being 3% down, 5% down? So no, I'm very, very, very aware of, what my job is. My job is to try and identify direction, enter, and then come out. Because obviously, what does that do? That lowers my overall risk, because if I'm in the markets less than everyone else, then obviously I'm obviously exposing myself to less risk. It doesn't matter what their risk to reward is. They could have a 1 to 20, but if they're in the market 20 times more than what I am, um, then then obviously I'm going to be exposing myself, even if I had a 1 to 1 risk to reward, and I'm entering, 1 to 3 to 4 trades a day, but they're entering 20. I've got an overall better risk to reward because every time that you're in these markets for a long period of time, scalping or swing, whatever, you are exposing to risk. So yeah, Michael, are we triggering any more pairs? Yep. We obviously need what we would need this morning is, like I mentioned, dollar to come down, and then what's that going to do? That's going to drag it up to obviously our kind of areas here. So yes, I'm open. I really, really want gold. I just want it. But obviously, because of USDJPY, we've got a nice chunk of cash there to obviously, expose a bit more risk into the, markets. So Beverly, I'm a million times better thanks to these sessions. That's brilliant to hear. That's obviously why I do them. Obviously it holds me accountable too. So I want to be held accountable. I want all my actions to be, here and transparent because obviously it makes me a better trader. That's what lots of people don't understand. Me hopping on, me, documenting everything, makes me accountable because obviously you guys have probably, realized trading is a very, very, lonely place. And, you obviously, the more accountability you've got, the better, so like I mentioned earlier, don't just send me, your profits. Send me the days where you've done things wrong because you're going to be owning up. Then you're accountable. You're going to be like, you know what, I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. I know why I did what I did. So obviously, the more accountability, obviously you guys see how transparent I am, and you guys need to be with yourself, need to be transparent too. So yeah, but right, if there's no more questions, I am going to hop on live later on because obviously I missed Sunday because I was flying home. So yeah, I will be probably live about 8, and we'll just do a big question and answer. So you can ask me whatever you want to. So have a great Tuesday. Let's smash it. We've already started well, and yeah, bring it on, guys. Bring it on.